Hey guys, tonight we're lying flat beneath a sky so dark and full of stars it almost hums. The air feels ancient, quiet enough that you could swear you're hearing the slow ticking of time itself. Above you, the Milky Way spills like powdered glass across an infinite velvet ceiling. You blink, and suddenly you're aware of how absurdly small you are, a tiny heartbeat beneath a billion-year-old blaze. You probably wouldn't survive a week without the sun, but still, you can't help staring at the cold fires of distant worlds and wondering, who first decided to measure them? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where everyone's watching from. It's like building our own constellation of sleepy night owls across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The night breathes around you, warm, dry, endless. You can almost taste dust and starlight. Thousands of years ago, someone just like you lay on a flat rooftop, watching these same constellations rise over the desert. No phone, no telescope, just eyes and wonder. The stars weren't decorations. They were messages, warnings, calendars. In that silent, glowing sky, humanity saw both destiny and danger. Imagine your world with no clocks, no Google, not even a map. The stars are your GPS, your diary, your calendar, your myth. They tell you when the floods come, when to plant wheat, when to start the journey home. Somewhere in that ancient quiet, humans realized that the heavens weren't chaos, they were patterned. The first astronomers weren't scientists in white coats. They were hunters who noticed that certain stars rose just before the rainy season. They were farmers who saw how moonlight changed the moods of their crops. And they were storytellers, your ancestors, who gave the sky faces and voices so they could remember it all. See that bright band across the sky, the Milky Way? In ancient myths, it was everything from a goddess's spilled milk to the road of souls, to a celestial river linking gods and mortals. You might laugh now, but those stories were early science wrapped in poetry. They kept knowledge alive across centuries when there were no books, only voices and memory. There's something profoundly human about lying in the dark and trying to decode the flicker of distant suns. Historians still argue whether humanity's first maps were of the earth or the sky, but the oldest carvings we've found suggest people mapped constellations long before they ever drew coastlines. A bone fragment from Paleolithic France, covered with dots and scratches, matches the pattern of the Pleiades, those delicate seven sisters above Taurus. Thousands of years old, and someone already thought to record the heavens. You can imagine that moment. A flickering fire, shadows stretching over cave walls, someone pointing a soot-blackened finger at the stars, whispering, "There, they always rise before the dear return." Knowledge passed mouth to mouth, fire to fire. The universe was their classroom, and every night was a lecture in light. Fast forward to a Neolithic camp somewhere in Anatolia. You're crouched by a stone circle that marks solstices with eerie precision. These were early observatories, not for tourists but for survival. Miss the right moment to plant, starve. Misread the moon, lose your crops. Astronomy was religion, math, and insurance policy all rolled into one. And somewhere between ritual and record, the first stargazers began to suspect something wild, that the movements above weren't random. The sky had rules. You could predict it. You could measure time not by the whims of gods but by repeating cycles. That was the spark that built civilizations. Of course, not everyone agreed on what the stars meant. Some said they were gods themselves, others messengers. A few daring thinkers whispered that they were distant fires, suns, maybe like our own. Historians still argue whether the earliest skywatchers were priests or scientists, but truthfully, they were both. They saw no divide between sacred and scientific. To measure the stars was to listen to the divine heartbeat of creation. You shift slightly on your imaginary rooftop and glance east. The constellation Orion is rising, the hunter with his belt of 3 perfect stars. Ancient Egyptians saw him as Osiris, the god of resurrection. The Babylonians called him the true shepherd of heaven. The Greeks, of course, turned him into a boastful warrior, stung to death by a scorpion. Same stars, different stories. Every culture painted its own mirror across the sky. And then there's the moon, our moody neighbor. She's been worshipped, feared, measured, and blamed for everything from madness to fertility. Ancient observers tracked her phases so carefully that lunar calendars predate solar ones by centuries. One quirky tidbit, in some early societies, months literally meant moons. You didn't say 3 months ago, you said 3 moons past. Sounds poetic, right? Until you remember trying to pay rent by lunar cycles. Over time, as people settled into villages and cities, the night sky became a kind of communal diary. Temples faced certain constellations. Stories were timed to align with equinoxes. Stonehenge wasn't built just for ritual. It's a prehistoric calendar you can walk through. The sun, moon, and stars marked human life the way hours do for you now. And what's oddly comforting is that you're still part of that same rhythm. Your body wakes and sleeps by light and darkness. Your phone screen steals hours once ruled by the moon. Somewhere deep down, you remember that you used to navigate by stars. It's why camping feels strangely familiar and city lights feel like theft. Now the wind picks up. You close your eyes and the hum of insects turns into the crackle of ancient fires. You smell clay, resin, smoke. You hear chants in languages long gone, each syllable timed with a star's appearance. Somewhere far off, a priest is marking the position of Venus. Somewhere else, a child is tracing the Big Dipper with sticky fingers, promising to never forget. In that instant, across all those centuries, you realize something profound. The night sky is the only thing all humans have ever truly shared. Every war, every empire, every love story, it all happened under these same constellations. And no matter how much light we pour into our cities, the stars still wait, just beyond the glare, patient as ever. So you breathe, you stare, you listen. The stars don't whisper answers, but they hum the oldest question of all. Where are you in all this? The answer, maybe, is simple. You're the next observer, the next dreamer, the next tiny human who dares to look up and make sense of infinity. And as you settle deeper into your pillow, the story of starlight continues, heading east to where civilization first built towers just to touch the heavens. You climb. Step by baked step, the ziggurat rises before you, terraces of sun-baked brick stacked like a giant staircase, climbing from the dust straight toward the stars. The night is dry and warm, and the air smells faintly of oil, reed smoke, and baked clay. Down below, the city of murmurs softly, its canals glimmering with moonlight. You can hear a distant lullaby and the lowing of oxen. But up here, where the wind hums through carved stone, you stand closer to heaven than anyone else for miles. A priest, his head shaved smooth, tends to the flickering lamps at the summit. He nods at you, silent, motioning toward the sky. Between 2 horns of bronze, he has stretched a taut cord of palm fiber, a line used not for music but for measurement. He raises a stylus, dips it in oil, and marks a pattern of stars on a wet clay tablet. You watch the glistening dots take shape, a record of the night. Welcome to ancient Mesopotamia, cradle of writing, mathematics, and of course, stargazing. Here, under the crescent moon of the Sumerians, astronomy wasn't just curiosity, it was order, divine and earthly. The priests who climbed these towers weren't just clerics, they were mathematicians, meteorologists, timekeepers, and prophets. Their temples weren't just shrines, they were calendars in brick form. You probably wouldn't last long in their world. Miss one flood season and your barley field becomes a mud pit. Misread the stars and the king might decide the gods are angry with you. But for those who mastered the heavens, the payoff was divine. You could predict eclipses, floods, harvests, even political favor, all by the shifting light of the stars. You lean against a warm wall, feeling the baked clay vibrate faintly from the chants echoing below. The priest beside you mutters to himself, tallying planetary movements. The Sumerians knew of Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. They called them wandering stars, and each one carried a god's temperament. Venus, Inanna, goddess of love and war, was both blessing and warning. When she rose in the dawn, something big was coming. Down in the temples, scribes pressed wedges into clay cuneiform, the first written language. On many of those tablets, the oldest surviving star charts were born. One from 1000 BCE maps the night sky with mathematical precision, noting not just where the stars shone, but when. That right there was humanity's first data set. No cloud storage, just sun-dried mud and eternal curiosity. The priest holds up a bronze instrument, its edges darkened from years of use. It's a sighting tool, a simple forerunner to the sextant. He aligns its edge with the bright star you now know as Aldebaran. The air is utterly still. He marks the angle, mutters the number under his breath. The measurement disappears into a whispered prayer. You wonder quietly how many nights like this it took to understand that time itself could be read from the stars. Probably hundreds, thousands, and those who did it were patient beyond imagining. No wonder they built temples so tall. It wasn't about pride, it was about perspective. The higher you climbed, the closer you came to precision. Historians still argue whether these early astronomer priests genuinely believed they were reading divine messages, or whether they'd already separated science from faith. But maybe that distinction never mattered. For them, the cosmos was a conversation. Every comet was a sentence, every eclipse a punctuation mark. One of those marks still echoes in stone. You walk along the edge of the ziggurat, tracing symbols carved into its bricks, tiny indentations that record the rising of a star cluster at the equinox. It's believed that these temples weren't just aligned for beauty, they were cosmic instruments. At certain moments of the year, the light of dawn would pass straight through a narrow passage, illuminating the inner sanctum where the god statue waited. An ancient light show, yes, but also a clock made of architecture. Down below, the city stirs. Traders haul baskets of dates, potters turn clay on slow wheels, and everywhere the rhythm of the heavens guides human motion. The lunar month shapes the festival calendar. The rising of Sirius signals the turn of the agricultural year. Even the legal system in some regions followed celestial omens. An eclipse might postpone the coronation of a king or halt a trade deal. Imagine trying that excuse at work. Sorry, boss, Mars is retrograde, meeting delayed. One quirky tidbit. The Babylonians, who inherited and refined much of this star knowledge, were the first to divide the circle into 360 degrees. Why? Because that's roughly the number of days in their year, give or take a few moonlit errors. Every time you check your geometry homework or turn a steering wheel, you're echoing a decision made under these Mesopotamian stars nearly 4,000 years ago. The priest extinguishes one lamp and lights another, ritual precision, hour by hour. To you, it's hypnotic. To him, it's sacred math. The flicker of fire mirrors the rhythm of planets. Somewhere in that measured dance lies both prophecy and peace. You close your eyes and picture the city below. Canals gleaming, temples glowing, constellations reflected in the water. The people of didn't just observe the stars, they lived inside their map. Their gods were constellations, their fates written in celestial ink. When you look up tonight, you're reading the same script, written by the same cosmic hand. The air grows cooler. The priest hands you a clay tablet still wet from inscription. On it, you recognize faint markings, a crescent, a cluster, a zigzag of dots. It's not art, it's an equation, one that predicts where the moon will rise in 6 days. You realize suddenly that this lump of clay is the ancestor of every chart, calendar, and app that tells you when the next full moon will glow. A breeze stirs. You set the tablet back and look up once more. The stars have shifted slightly, proof of time's passage. Somewhere below, a rooster crows too early. You laugh softly. Even then, not everyone agreed on what the stars said. Some saw destiny, others just saw weather. The argument still hasn't ended. And as dawn begins to bleed across the horizon, washing the stars away, you descend the staircase slowly, dust clinging to your feet. The priest remains, waiting for the last glimmer of Venus to fade. You glance back at him, a solitary figure between heaven and earth, and think, Every modern scientist, every dreamer who's ever stared at the sky is his descendant. The ziggurat shrinks behind you, swallowed by the morning haze. Ahead lies the Nile, where stone, sand, and sunlight will shape a new kind of celestial devotion. But for now, you carry with you the hum of ancient calculation, the heartbeat of the stars themselves. You reach the banks of the Nile just as the horizon blushes gold. The air feels thick with heat and promise. Papyrus reeds sway gently, whispering secrets older than language. A heron lifts from the shallows, scattering droplets that sparkle like stars reborn in daylight. The sun, Ra's own fiery chariot, rises in measured glory, and suddenly you understand why the Egyptians worshipped the heavens not as a mystery, but as a map of divine design. The pyramids loom ahead, those eternal triangles of light and shadow. You've seen them in documentaries, but in this moment, standing in the dust with your sandals sinking into the sand, you realize how impossible they are. Each block perfectly angled, each face aligned not at random but to the cardinal points, north, south, east, west, with a precision so exact that even modern surveyors blink in disbelief. Coincidence? Not in this land of geometry and gods. You step into the shade of a temple complex near Heliopolis, city of the sun. The priests here wear white linen robes, their heads shaved smooth, their movements slow and deliberate. One traces a line of light across the floor, marking the sun's journey through the year. No quartz watches, no calendars pinned to walls, only stone, sunlight, and the patience of eternity. It's easy to forget that for the Egyptians, time wasn't something to spend. It was something to honor. Every sunrise was Ra reborn, every sunset is death. And between those two eternal acts, life unfolded in rhythm with the cosmos. You probably wouldn't survive a day in this heat, but still, there's something intoxicating about the order of it all, like the universe itself keeps perfect time and Egypt simply listens. Historians still argue whether the Great Pyramid's alignment to true north was achieved by starlight or by the shadow of the sun, but either way, it wasn't an accident. The builders tracked circumpolar stars, those that never set, symbols of eternity, to guide their work. To them, immortality wasn't just a wish, it was written in the sky. The pharaoh's soul, upon death, was said to ascend along the Akhit, the horizon, joining the imperishable stars. You wander deeper into the temple, past hieroglyphs that shimmer faintly in torchlight. They're not just art, they're equations disguised as prayer. One tablet shows priests measuring shadows to mark solstices. Another depicts the rising of Sirius, the star they called Sopdet. Its annual appearance just before dawn signaled the flooding of the Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt. Miss that sign and famine followed. Read it right, and the fields bloomed with grain and lotus. You crouch beside a low altar where a small bronze instrument rests, a merkit, the Egyptian ancestor of the modern astronomical transit tool. 2 sticks, a plumb line, and pure patience. By aligning it with a specific star, the priests could determine time at night, dividing it into hours long before mechanical clocks existed. And you thought your smartwatch was advanced. The air hums softly as the high priest enters, a tall figure draped in linen, gold glinting at his wrists. He raises his staff toward the open courtyard, where a single beam of sunlight pierces through a slit in the wall and lands on a carved falcon's eye. You feel the temperature shift, the world holding its breath. At this exact moment, the sun aligns perfectly with the temple's axis. It happens only twice a year. The crowd murmurs reverently. The universe, it seems, is punctual. A child beside you points upward, eyes wide. You follow his gaze to the bright spark still visible in the morning light, Sirius again, stubbornly shining through the dawn. That shimmer marks both the season and the spirit of rebirth. The priests chant softly, a rhythm that echoes the heartbeat of the river. Even you feel caught in it, like the stars, the sand, and your lungs all move together. One quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe Egyptian priests created the first star clocks, rows of constellations painted inside tombs to mark the hours of the night. As the stars moved, really, as the earth turned, time passed. Imagine trying to tell someone you'll meet them at half Orion instead of 7 p.m. That's how deeply time and sky were woven together. You step outside again. The light is fierce now, but your eyes adjust. The Sphinx stares eternally toward the east, its expression unreadable but purposeful. Some say its orientation captures the first rays of the equinox sunrise. Others insist that it marks an older celestial alignment, one now forgotten. Historians still argue whether it once faced Leo the lion at a time when the constellations were different. If true, that would make the Sphinx not just old but prehistorically ancient. You walk along a corridor of tall pillars carved with lotus and papyrus. Shadows glide across the walls, forming slow-motion sundials. A priest stops beside you, drawing a circle in the dust. "Everything," he says in a voice as low as wind through reeds, "returns." His finger traces the circle again. "The gods, the river, the stars, we are the reflection of what moves above." And you realize this isn't superstition, it's philosophy. To the Egyptians, the universe was a mirror. The rhythm of the sky echoed in the rhythm of life. Their temples were maps, their rituals calculations. They built not to defy death, but to synchronize with the immortal. You tilt your head back and squint. The midday sun burns high, but you can just make out the faint trace of moonlight pale against the blue. Day and night, two halves of one story. You think of the ziggurat you just left, the priests still watching Venus fade, and feel the thread connecting them to this moment. Civilizations change, languages vanish, but the stars remain constant. Ancient punctuation marks in humanity's long sentence. You wander to the riverbank. Fishermen toss their nets, children laugh and splash. Life carries on, but overhead, the same celestial patterns persist. The sky isn't silent, it's patient, waiting for each new generation to look up and translate it anew. Behind you, the temple doors close with a deep, resonant thud. Dust swirls upward, catching the sunlight in a brief golden halo. Somewhere deep inside, a priest marks the calendar for another year. And as you gaze westward, the desert wind carries your thoughts toward another ancient horizon, a place where the stars are seen through silk and incense, under a different philosophy, painted on scrolls of jade and cloud. You stand now beneath a pale jade sky. The air smells faintly of rain and sandalwood, and in the distance, the curved rooftops of an ancient Chinese observatory gleam like shells in the moonlight. Crickets sing in slow rhythm, their chirps blending with the rustle of silk robes. You can almost hear paper rustling, thin sheets of bamboo strips and ink, fluttering like soft wings. The stars above seem sharper here, each one a needlepoint of thought. A scholar in flowing robes bows slightly and beckons you closer. His name isn't important. He could be one of hundreds who spent their nights watching the heavens for the Son of Heaven, the Emperor himself. You follow him up the narrow stairs of the observatory tower, each wooden step creaking beneath your feet. When you reach the top, the wind catches your sleeve, cold and electric with starlight. Before you stretches the vast sky of the Middle Kingdom, mapped, named, and interpreted with precision that would make even Babylonian priests nod in approval. To these astronomers, the stars weren't just distant fires. They were the pulse of the Tian, the celestial order. Heaven itself had bureaucracy, and the stars were its officials. When one went missing or strayed, it wasn't just an astronomical anomaly. It was a cosmic political scandal. You lean against a railing as the scholar opens a bamboo case, pulling out a delicate scroll painted with constellations. Not 12 like in the Western zodiac, oh no. The Chinese night held 28 lunar mansions, each one marking the path of the moon. Every night, the moon drifted to a new mansion, a celestial neighborhood with its own legends, omens, and administrative duties. He points toward the east, where a bright guest star has appeared, a nova, though no one calls it that yet. It flares near the heart of the constellation you know as Scorpio. The scholar murmurs the name, Xin Qi Xing, a guest star. He records its position with calm precision, but inside you can sense his pulse racing. Centuries later, astronomers would identify this as SN 1054, the supernova that birthed the Crab Nebula. But tonight, it's simply a new visitor from heaven, proof that even the divine sky can surprise. Historians still argue whether the Chinese court fully understood the stellar explosion they witnessed, but their records remain astonishingly accurate. Some even speculate that imperial astronomers tracked it continuously for nearly 2 years. Imagine sitting here night after night, candle flickering, marking every change in brightness while the empire sleeps below. You'd probably fall asleep after an hour, but these scholars didn't dare miss a single glimmer. You glance down at the ink pots and brushes laid out beside him. Each mark he makes isn't just data, it's destiny. For in imperial China, the cosmos and the court were intertwined. An unexpected comet could foretell famine. A solar eclipse might predict rebellion. When something strange appeared in the heavens, the emperor demanded explanation and fast. A wrong prediction wasn't just embarrassing, it could be lethal. The scholar dips his brush again, hand steady despite the chill. The stars, he whispers, are the eyes of heaven. He pauses, glances toward the forbidden city far to the south. If they close, the empire sleeps. If they open, it must awaken. You can't help but smile at the poetic terror of it all. Somewhere between astronomy and astrology lies politics. But to be fair, even in the modern world, people still check their horoscopes before making big decisions. So maybe we haven't evolved as much as we'd like to think. Beneath the tower, the great bronze instruments gleam. Armillary spheres, gnomons, and sighting tubes, primitive telescopes without glass. These were the tools of the Han, Tang, and Song dynasties, each generation refining the previous one's designs. One particularly beautiful piece, the Hunyi, shows the heavens as a rotating sphere, its inner rings representing the equator and the ecliptic. Turn it, and you can predict where the stars will rise months ahead. You touch the cool metal and feel an odd connection, as if the centuries between you and the craftsmen who built it have collapsed into a single breath. They didn't just observe, they built the universe in miniature, turning time itself by hand. The scholar lights a small lantern. Its warm glow dances across the scrolls, illuminating constellations with names that sound like poems. The azure dragon of the east, the vermilion bird of the south, the white tiger of the west, the black tortoise of the north. Together they form the 4 symbols, the guardians of direction, season, and fate. Each one embodies not just stars, but the spirit of balance itself. You look up and can almost see them shimmering above, the dragon curling around spring, the bird blazing through summer, the tiger stalking autumn, the tortoise guarding winter's silence. It's not superstition, it's symmetry. The world above mirrors the world below, and in a universe of bureaucracy, even the stars have departments. One quirky tidbit: the world's oldest known record of a solar eclipse comes from China, dated to 2137 BCE. It describes 2 royal astronomers, HSI and Ho, who got a bit too drunk and failed to predict it. The emperor, unimpressed, had them executed. Talk about a performance review gone wrong. The night deepens. Clouds drift past, silver at their edges. You hear a bell in the distance, a curfew bell reminding citizens that darkness belongs to scholars and spirits. The astronomer beside you sighs, seals his ink, and rolls up his scroll. The heavens are constant, he murmurs, but men forget. You glance out over the tiled rooftops of Kaifeng or Chang'an, cities glowing faintly in lamplight. Smoke curls into the air, joining the constellations in a hazy dance. The moon, pale and precise, slides into its next mansion. And as you descend the tower, footsteps echoing on polished wood, you can't shake the feeling that something of this place lingers inside you, that careful attention, that reverence for rhythm. In every measurement, a hint of poetry, in every superstition, a seed of science. Outside, a soft drizzle begins. The rain smells like iron and earth. You look up through the mist, and for a heartbeat, the stars seem to ripple, like brushstrokes on inked silk, shimmering with stories too vast to tell. You smile, because somewhere west, in lands of monsoon and myth, another kind of star lore waits, where hymns and geometry meet, and where gods dance across constellations older than memory. The air shifts again, humid now, thick with the scent of cardamom and river mud. You're standing in the twilight of the Indian subcontinent, where monsoon clouds hang like bruised silk over palm groves and temple towers. The horizon glows orange, then deep indigo. A peacock screams somewhere in the distance. Fireflies blink along the banks of a slow, swollen river. And overhead, oh, the sky. It bursts alive with the rhythmic pulse of the moon and stars, the same celestial script that guided poets, priests, and astronomers here for more than 3,000 years. You're in the world of the rishis, the ancient sages who listened to the universe as if it were a hymn. A group of them sits by the river's edge, their robes the color of dust and dawn. They chant in Sanskrit, their voices blending with the sound of the water. The words are old, older than any empire, but familiar in their rhythm, the Rig Veda. And if you listen closely, you realize you're hearing some of humanity's earliest astronomical poetry. The verses speak of the dawn goddess Ushas, who brings light from darkness, of Surya, the sun riding his chariot across the sky, of Soma, the moon that waxes and wanes like breath. These aren't just deities, they're cosmic functions described as divine personalities. The ancients didn't divide science and spirituality. To them, describing the sky was worship. The rishi nearest you lifts a copper bowl of water, letting it reflect the stars. What is above, he murmurs, is within. You look into the bowl and see twin skis, the real one and its reflection, trembling softly with ripples. That simple image sums up an entire civilization's worldview, the universe as mirror, rhythm, and repetition. Historians still argue whether the earliest Vedic astronomers were truly calculating planetary motions or simply encoding ritual timings, but the results are clear. Out of this mixture of observation and devotion emerged the nakshatras, the 27 lunar mansions that charted the moon's monthly journey. Each mansion bore a name, a ruling deity, and a meaning: Ardra the stormy, Rohini the fertile, Ashwini the swift. Farmers used them to plant, sailors to navigate, and priests to schedule ceremonies. One of the rishis smooths wet clay and sketches a crescent moon with a stick. Here, he says, the moon spends one night, then moves on. His hand moves with mathematical precision, though he'd never call it that. Each nakshatra is a heartbeat. Together, they make a month. You realize that what he's drawing is both a calendar and a philosophy, a way to anchor the unpredictable tides of life in the dependable rhythm of the sky. Later, this system would evolve into Jyotisha, the Indian science of light, part astronomy, part astrology, all deeply woven into daily life. You walk uphill toward a temple crowned with stone carvings of dancers, elephants, and celestial beings. The walls seem to shimmer with starlight as torches flicker. Inside, you find a small chamber open to the sky, where a thin beam of moonlight strikes a polished crystal at the center. It's not decorative, it's deliberate. This temple, like many built across ancient India, is astronomically aligned. Its corridors mirror the movement of constellations. Its sanctum marks solstices and equinoxes with pinpoint accuracy. You crouch as a priest draws a column, a geometric pattern on the floor with rice flour. Circles, triangles, spirals. To an outsider, it looks like art. To him, it's a diagram of cosmic order. Every curve, every line represents the dance of creation and destruction, day and night, waxing and waning. If Stonehenge was a calendar in stone, this is a calendar in motion, redrawn daily, then washed away. The priest smiles and gestures upward. The constellation of Orion glimmers faintly through the temple's skylight, and you recall how he was Osiris in Egypt, a shepherd in Babylon, and now here. He's the warrior Emriga, the deer hunter. Same stars, new story. Humanity keeps reinterpreting heaven, remixing the same celestial playlist across centuries. One quirky tidbit: ancient Indian astronomers calculated the length of a solar year to within half a minute of modern estimates, using nothing but shadows, water clocks, and patience. Let that sink in. You need atomic clocks to reach that precision today, and they had it 3,000 years ago with clay pots and sunlight. You sit cross-legged near the temple's entrance, watching a group of students recite from palm leaf manuscripts. Their voices are steady, the cadence hypnotic. Each chant encodes astronomical data, eclipses, planetary periods, angular distances. This oral transmission ensured accuracy for generations. No books, no telescopes, just disciplined memory. A young apprentice, his fingers stained with soot and ink, whispers to you, "We follow the Surya Siddhanta." He lifts the fragile manuscript for you to see. Its verses describe everything from Earth's circumference to the cause of lunar eclipses. You skim a line that reads, "The Earth is a sphere supported by its own force." You blink. That's the 5th century CE talking. Long before Galileo pointed a telescope at Jupiter, India already understood gravity, well, sort of. But not everyone agreed on the interpretation of the sky. Some argued the planets were divine beings on predictable circuits. Others claimed they were merely light-reflecting orbs. Historians still argue whether Vedic cosmology was symbolic, empirical, or something in between. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was harmony, the belief that if you lived in rhythm with the cosmos, things below would fall into place. Outside, thunder rumbles. The first raindrops strike the stone courtyard, hissing as they meet the heat. You step out into the downpour, feeling the warm rain run down your arms. Lightning flickers across the horizon, illuminating the silhouette of the temple's gopuram against a wild, starless sky. The same stars that guided these sages now hide behind the storm, but you know they're still there, waiting. You think about how different yet connected all these ancient skywatchers were. Mesopotamian priests climbed ziggurats for altitude. Egyptian architects used shadow for precision. Chinese scholars charted stars for emperors. Indian sages listened for rhythm. 4 corners of the ancient world, one shared obsession: to understand what moved above. The rain eases. The air smells clean, new. You glance upward, and through a break in the clouds, the moon appears sharp, serene, framed by drifting vapor. The rishis bow toward it, palms pressed together. You find yourself doing the same. Somewhere west, philosophers in white robes will soon debate what holds that moon aloft, turning faith into geometry and observation into reason. But for now, you stand in this sacred rain, feeling the pulse of the stars reflected in the river's silver surface, and realize that the story of the sky is becoming a story of the mind. The rain fades. The sound of dripping leaves and frogs gives way to dry wind and the creak of wood against stone. You blink, and the world changes again. Gone are the palm groves and monsoon scents. In their place rises a landscape of dust and geometry, white marble courtyards, ochre deserts, and domes that catch the sun like mirrors. You're standing in ancient Greece, just as the stars begin to prick through the twilight haze over the Aegean. You smell salt and olive oil, hear distant laughter from a symposium by the shore. Lanterns flicker, shadows stretch. Somewhere a lyre twangs softly as philosophers, mathematicians, and poets raise cups of wine under the same stars you saw over India. But here, the mood is different, less prayerful, more curious, almost defiant. The heavens are no longer a divine rhythm, they're a puzzle waiting to be solved. You wander closer to a colonnaded courtyard. Beneath it sits a man with an impressive beard and a face lit by torchlight. His name, someone whispers, is Thales of Miletus, the man who predicted a solar eclipse. He's gesturing at the sky, describing how the sun might be a ball of fire, not a god's chariot. The others listen, wide-eyed, torn between awe and mild heresy. You can't help but grin. The Greeks are about to do something radical, separate myth from mechanism. "Measure, not worship," Thales mutters, dipping a reed into water to demonstrate how shadows bend. The gods won't punish curiosity. It's a bold claim, one that sets off centuries of thinkers who will try to chart the sky with pure reason. A few decades later, you find yourself in Pythagoras' secretive school at Croton. The smell of incense and fresh papyrus fills the air. The students speak in hushed tones, for to them, numbers aren't just symbols, they're sacred. "All is number," their teacher proclaims, as he plucks a lyre string to demonstrate the harmony of ratios. "And if harmony governs music," he continues, "then it must govern the stars." He calls this concept the music of the spheres. You tilt your head and almost think you hear it, a faint hum like wind through harp strings vibrating between the planets. It's a beautiful idea, the cosmos as a symphony of mathematics. Modern astronomers might roll their eyes, but the poetic truth holds. The universe really does operate in harmonic ratios, orbital periods, gravitational balances, resonance. You just can't hear it. Historians still argue whether Pythagoras personally discovered this cosmic harmony, or if it was a later myth woven around his name. But either way, his students built an entire worldview around geometry, proportion, and balance. They saw triangles and pentagons as doorways into divine truth. You step outside and look at the night sky. It feels suddenly structured, as if every constellation is part of an invisible grid. Farther along the coast, you come to a circular tower overlooking the sea. A man stands at its top, adjusting a bronze instrument, a ringed contraption with rotating parts. This is Eudoxus of Cnidus, and that gadget is his model of the universe, concentric spheres upon spheres, each turning at its own pace. He believes the heavens can be mapped mechanically, that each planet rides on a nested sphere. It's elegant, it's wrong, but it's the seed of something extraordinary. You lean over the parapet as he explains to a young listener. Imagine the Earth fixed at the center. Around it, crystal shells turn, carrying stars like lanterns. His eyes gleam with pride. If we can predict their motion, then we know the mind of the cosmos. A few generations later, someone will take that dream and turn it into mathematics. His name is Hipparchus. You find him in a small courtyard in Rhodes, squinting through a primitive sighting tube. The smell of salt air and ink fills the night. Around him are clay tablets marked with constellations and careful notes. He's not worshiping or guessing. He's measuring, meticulously. You crouch beside him as he aligns his tube with a bright star, Spica, maybe, and scribbles numbers on a wax tablet. He's doing something no one else has done before, creating the first known star catalog. Over 1,000 stars, each with coordinates. You'd call it data. He'd call it devotion of another kind. And here comes the jaw-dropper. Hipparchus discovers precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts the position of the stars over centuries. He notices that the equinox point has moved compared to Babylonian records. The heavens themselves drift, he murmurs, both awed and disturbed. Historians still argue whether he stumbled upon it by accident or through brilliant deduction, but either way, it's one of humanity's greatest observational leaps. You can't resist whispering. You basically just discovered the motion of our planet without leaving your porch. He doesn't hear you, of course, but you can tell he knows he's staring at something bigger than geometry, something alive. Next, you find yourself on a sun-bleached island where an aging polymath hunches over gears and bronze plates. The room smells of oil and seaweed. A window lets in thin, silver light. His name, possibly Archimedes, or one of his contemporaries, working on what future divers will call the Antikythera mechanism, a hand-cranked device that predicts eclipses and planetary cycles. He turns the gear once and the small dials click forward. Here, he says, pointing, the moon, here the sun, and when they meet, darkness falls. You stare at the miniature cosmos spinning in his hands and realize this isn't myth anymore. It's a simulation, a mechanical universe centuries ahead of its time. You crack a quiet joke to yourself, and here I am, impressed by my smartwatch. Outside, night deepens. The Aegean glows faintly with starlight. You follow the coastline to a marble amphitheater where a new voice echoes, a voice that will shape the sky's narrative for nearly 2 millennia. Aristotle. He gestures with the calm authority of a man certain the universe listens when he speaks. The heavens, he declares, are perfect, unchanging spheres. You feel a little uneasy at that word, unchanging, because you've seen storms on Jupiter, witnessed eclipses and supernovas. But for Aristotle, perfection means stability. Change is corruption, and the heavens must remain incorruptible. A young student scribbles notes. Later, he'll be known as Ptolemy. You can almost sense the gears turning in his mind, aligning celestial motions with circles and epicycles. When he finally writes the Almagest, he'll codify everything into one elegant system, the Earth-centered cosmos. It'll hold sway for 1,400 years. You sit under the marble steps as Aristotle continues. His logic feels sound, almost comforting. Everything has its place, he says, and beyond the sphere of fixed stars lies the prime mover, the cause of all motion. You exhale slowly. It's neat, complete, and tragically wrong, but it gives humanity something crucial, a framework to challenge later. Nearby, a group of younger thinkers whisper heretically. "What if the Earth moves?" they murmur. You grin. They'll get their moment soon enough. For now, they're just seeds, tiny sparks under an empire of certainty. As dawn breaks, you notice the marble columns turning rose gold, shadows shrinking. The stars fade, but you can still feel their geometry pressing down from above, like invisible architecture. The Greeks may have trapped the heavens in circles, but they also taught the world to ask why. You take one last look at the fatting constellations, the hunter, the bull, the twins. They're the same ones drawn in Babylon, sung in India, and soon they'll find new names in the Latin tongue. The constellations don't care what culture names them. They just keep shining, patient, ancient, waiting for the next civilization to look up and ask again. What are you, really? You're still standing beneath the same stars, but the air feels heavier, warmer, and smells faintly of lotus and incense. The marble precision of Greece softens into the ochre haze of Alexandria, where oil lamps glow like miniature suns in the night. Somewhere beyond the harbor, waves slap against wooden hulls, and the famous lighthouse, a column of flame and marble taller than any tower before it, casts its light across the sea. It's the 3rd century BCE, and you've wandered into one of the most extraordinary places humanity ever built, the Library of Alexandria. Not a temple, not a palace, but a sanctuary of thought. Every scroll, every whisper of starlight reflected in ink. You drift through cool corridors lined with papyrus and cedar shelves, the air thick with the smell of dust, salt, and ink. Here, philosophy, science, and wonder are all roommates. You pause as a young scholar unrolls a scroll covered in looping Greek script. "This one, Aristarchus," she says, eyes shining. "He thinks the earth moves around the sun." You blink. "Wait, what? 2,000 years before Copernicus." She nods eagerly. "He says the sun is the center and the earth just another wandering star." You laugh softly. "And how did that go over?" She grimaces. "Everyone thought he was insane." Aristarchus of Samos, history's forgotten heliocentrist. He argued that the universe was far larger than anyone imagined, that the stars were suns too distant to see as disks. He was right, of course, but too early. His math was good, his logic sound, yet it clashed with the comfortable certainty of Aristotle and the ever-practical Ptolemaic model. Historians still argue whether he truly proved his case or just guessed brilliantly. Either way, you can almost see him, scribbling with charcoal under lamplight, sketching a sun-centered solar system that no one wanted to believe. In another room, you find Eratosthenes, head librarian and all-around overachiever. He's packing between 2 globes, one terrestrial, one celestial, muttering numbers. 7 degrees, 1/50th of a circle. He dips a stylus in ink and marks a figure on parchment. You peer over his shoulder and realize he's doing something absurdly ambitious, measuring the circumference of the Earth. He compares the shadows in Scene and Alexandria at noon, multiplies, divides, and boom, he's off by less than 1%. With nothing but sticks, shadows, and curiosity, you whistle softly. Historians still argue whether he was that precise or just lucky, you mutter, but either way, it's a flex. Eratosthenes grins. "We are all shadows," he says without looking up, "and geometry is the light." That night you follow him up to the observatory terrace atop the library. The sea glimmers in the distance, torches flicker on ships, and the stars blaze in crisp Mediterranean clarity. He traces constellations with a reed stylus against the sky, connecting dots of fire like a child with divine crayons. "The heavens," he murmurs, are not chaos. They are order waiting to be read. You notice something else nearby, metal instruments beautifully crafted, sighting tubes, sundials, curved rulers. These are the tools of the world's first scientific network. Alexandria wasn't just a library, it was a research hub. Scholars from Babylon, India, Greece, and Egypt worked side by side, translating, arguing, calculating. The stars had become international currency. You catch a glimpse of a table covered with strange brass circles. A young woman is polishing them, her hair tied with a strip of papyrus. She smiles at you shyly. For timing eclipses, she says, we follow the Saros cycle. Her tone is proud, like someone who's just learned to read the clockwork of the gods. You realize that here, astronomy isn't just for kings or priests anymore. It's for scholars, for minds that want to know why, not just how to please. But even this beacon of brilliance isn't eternal. You step into the courtyard one evening to find smoke curling above the city. The scent of burning papyrus fills your nose. Soldiers shout. Scrolls flutter through the air like desperate birds. The library, the greatest repository of ancient knowledge, is being consumed by fire. The stars above remain indifferent, watching quietly as centuries of starlight written in ink turn to ash. You stand helplessly as a charred fragment lands near your feet. A few lines are still legible. Measure the shadows, and you shall know the world. Then it crumbles. You can almost hear the collective gasp of history losing its memory. The fire dies. The wind carries the smell of cinders across the Mediterranean. Alexandria will recover, sort of, but something intangible has burned away too. Humanity will spend the next 1,000 years trying to reassemble what was lost that night. Still, not all light is gone. Some fragments survive, copied by scribes in faraway lands, carried by traders, preserved by chance. You follow one of those fragments east, into a world where the flame of Greek science is about to be rekindled under new stars. You find yourself crossing the desert toward Baghdad, where the night sky is so clear it feels close enough to touch. A young scholar named Almancer peers through an astrolabe the size of a dinner plate, its brass edges glinting in moonlight. Each star, he says softly, has a coordinate, a name, and a purpose. He adjusts the instrument, his hand steady as a surgeon. We are not guessing anymore. We are measuring the heavens. You recognize it immediately. The intellectual heartbeat of Alexandria, resurrected in Arabic. The library is gone, but the Beit al-Hikmah, the house of wisdom, now hums with activity. Translators work by candlelight, converting Greek and Persian astronomy into Arabic. You can smell ink and lamp oil, hear the scratching of styluses, the clink of astrolabe plates. Al-Khwarizmi leans over a desk nearby, his beard flecked with gold dust from brass filings. He's not just doing math, he's inventing algebra. Without numbers, he tells you, the sky is noise. With them, it sings. You chuckle quietly. You'll remember that line when you hear algorithms centuries later. In another corner, Al-Battani charts lunar motions, correcting Ptolemy's tables with astonishing precision. His data will guide sailors and scholars from Spain to Samarkand. You watch him trace the curve of the moon's orbit. Historians still argue whether we should call him an astronomer or a mathematician, someone whispers. He was both. Outside, you find a group of students lying on woven mats pointing out constellations. They laugh softly, swapping Greek names for Arabic ones. Lyra becomes Al-Nasser Al-Waki, Aquila the Eagle. Many of those names will survive into modern star charts. Vega, Aldebaran, Altair, echoes of that night under the Baghdad sky. The instruments here, astrolabes, armillary spheres, sextants, are not just scientific tools, they're art. You pick one up, etched brass, intricate markings, a star map you can hold in your hand. A teacher explains how travelers use it to find prayer times, the Qibla direction, or even latitude on the open sea. The stars, he says, remind us that everything has direction. And then there's Ibn al-Haytham, Al-Hazan to the west, who spends his nights experimenting with lenses and light. In a darkened room, he demonstrates how a pinhole projects the moon onto a wall. Vision, he says, is not rays from the eyes, it's light entering them. You grin. Buddy, you just invented the camera. By dawn, you're exhausted but exhilarated. You've just watched a civilization rebuild the heavens from fragments, turning faith into physics, poetry into optics. The Alexandrian dream survived, only now it wears a crescent moon instead of a laurel wreath. You lie on the rooftop of the observatory as the first call to prayer drifts through the city, mingling with the rustle of palm fronds and the soft glimmer of dawn. The stars fade one by one, but you can still feel their geometry in the morning air, measured, translated, and preserved by minds who refuse to let darkness win. The sky above the desert melts into pale rose and gold. Sand dunes shimmer like liquid metal under the rising sun. You take one long, slow breath, and when you open your eyes again, the landscape has shifted. The dunes are gone, replaced by cobblestones, ivy-clad towers, and the damp chill of a European dawn. Church bells ring in the distance, echoing off stone walls and narrow streets. You're in medieval Europe, somewhere between prayer and curiosity, between salvation and the stars. For centuries now, the heavens have been a theological ceiling, not a playground for questions. Monks record eclipses only as omens, comets as portents, and alignments as divine warnings. But lately, something's changing. A quiet rebellion is humming beneath the hymns. You wander through an abbey courtyard in northern France, where Benedictine monks shuffle past in brown robes. One pauses to adjust a massive sundial carved into the stone wall. To mark the hours of prayer, he says. But also, he glances around and smiles conspiratorially, to see what the sun is really doing. He's not alone in this secret dual life of devotion and discovery. Across Christendom, cathedrals double as cosmic instruments. Look up at Chartres, Amiens, or Salisbury. Their stained glass isn't random beauty, it's geometry, light, and coded astronomy. On solstices, the sun pierces the rose window at a perfect angle, igniting the nave with golden fire. A sermon in sunlight, as one medieval chronicler called it. Inside, you can almost hear the whisper of astrolabes hidden in cassocks, monks muttering planetary data under their breath between psalms. The world may belong to theology, but the heavens are slipping into the hands of geometry again. One friar invites you to his chamber. The place smells of beeswax, vellum, and old wool. A single candle flickers beside a strange bronze disc, the latest wonder from the Arab world. A gift, he says reverently, an astrolabium. He traces the engraved lines with one finger. It tells time from stars and stars from time, a map of heaven you can hold. He sets it on the table, aligns it with Polaris, and suddenly the lines come alive. Circles within circles, a tiny cosmos of metal and math. Historians still argue, he says, whether it is an instrument of faith or reason. He chuckles. I say, why not both? Outside, the rain begins. You walk beneath arched cloisters, the sound of drops tapping rhythmically against the tiles. The smell of wet earth and candle smoke fills the air. The friars are talking about a man in Spain, Gerard of Cremona, who's translating Arabic manuscripts into Latin. Words like zenith, azimuth, and algebra sneak into European tongues for the first time. It's as if the lost fire of Alexandria is slowly reigniting under Gothic spires. You follow the rumor trail south to Cordoba. The air grows warmer, perfumed with orange blossoms and wood smoke. Here, under Islamic rule, libraries rival Baghdad's, and scholars from three faiths, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, debate freely in echoing halls. You listen to an astronomer explaining to a rabbi how planetary orbits might be modeled not by perfect circles, but by smaller ones riding atop them, epicycles. It's messy, he sighs, but the stars obey it. You spot a young translator nearby, hunched over parchment. His name is Michael Scott, and he's painstakingly converting Arabic star tables into Latin. For the universities, he tells you proudly, they're finally teaching the heavens, not just the scriptures. Back north, the universities are indeed blooming: Paris, Bologna, Oxford. Their courtyards smell of damp parchment and intellectual risk. A group of students gathers around a master who sketches a circle on the ground with a stick. Aristotle says the heavens are perfect spheres, he begins. But what if they're not? You can feel the air tighten, heresy whispered like thunder, but curiosity keeps them rooted. That's the thing about the medieval mind. It's not asleep. It's dreaming with rules. Night falls over Oxford. You find yourself in a small tower room, candles guttering, books scattered. A friar with sharp eyes and ink-stained fingers is adjusting an orrery, a model of the cosmos made of gears and spheres. His name, Roger Bacon. His students call him Dr. Mirabilis, the wonderful teacher. He notices you and grins. Everyone prays for miracles, he says, but I prefer experiments. He lowers his voice. If God gave us minds, he meant for us to use them. He demonstrates a new lens, curved glass that magnifies the moon. You peer through it and gasp. The craters are imperfect, rough, not divine crystal. Bacon nods knowingly. So much for celestial perfection. You laugh softly. Historians still argue whether he saw actual lunar detail or just imagined it, you whisper. But in this candle-lit moment, it hardly matters. The idea of seeing is rebellion enough. Elsewhere in England, a monk named Bede had already written meticulous chronicles of eclipses and solstices centuries earlier, calculating Easter with astronomical precision. His tables quietly outperformed Rome's calendar, though he'd never admit it aloud. Meanwhile, across Europe, the church clock is being born, not just as a way to mark prayer hours, but as a symbol of cosmic order. Each tick and tock, a reflection of heavenly mechanics. Cathedrals begin to sprout clock towers, their gears echoing the orbit of planets. The medieval sky becomes a vast clockwork cathedral, time sanctified by motion. And then, somewhere in the 13th century, a quiet figure appears, a Dominican friar named Thomas Aquinas. He sits beneath a window, quill scratching, arguing that reason and faith are not enemies but partners. The heavens, he writes, reveal God's order as clearly as Scripture. Truth cannot contradict truth. You can almost see him smiling at the thought that Aristotle and Genesis might share a cup of wine someday. The centuries drift by. In Florence, artists study geometry not for theology but perspective. Painters look at the curve of the dome and think of the dome of heaven. The stars slip into art, the divine into math. A few bold thinkers start murmuring again, echoes of Aristarchus. What if we move, not the stars? It's a dangerous whisper, but the kind that never stays buried for long. The printing press will soon spread it faster than any sermon. For now, though, the medieval night is serene. 1,000 candles flicker in windows, each one a small rebellion against the dark. The stars look down, steady, eternal, patient, and you realize that the long sleep of Europe is nearly over. The heavens are about to wake the world again. You lean against a stone balustrade and look up. Orion climbs the winter sky, his belt clear above the cathedral's spire. The bells toll midnight. You breathe the cold air, half incense, half smoke, and think, the next chapter won't be whispered in cloisters. It'll be shouted through telescopes. The bells fade into the distance. Smoke drifts upward in slow spirals, dissolving into the stars. You turn your gaze to the horizon, where a new kind of light begins to bloom, not the fire of candles or sunrise, but something sharper, cooler, alive with thought. The medieval world is giving way to something restless. You find yourself in Krakow, winter of 1514. Snow drifts past rooftops, and the streets smell of parchment, wax, and horsehair. In a small, unheated study behind the cathedral, a man bends over a desk littered with ink pots and astronomical charts. His breath clouds the air, and his hand trembles slightly as he draws a perfect circle. Nicolaus Copernicus. His candlelight pools over parchment titled Commentariolus, a modest little paper that will quietly shake the foundations of heaven. He pauses, taps his quill, and whispers the words almost like a prayer. The sun, not the earth, stands at the center of all things. It sounds almost too daring to say aloud. For centuries, humanity has been at the heart of the cosmos, surrounded, watched, comforted by the divine gaze. But now, Copernicus's world turns upside down, or perhaps, finally, right side up. He does not shout it. He doesn't even publish it widely. It spreads like rumor, like a secret fire in the margins of Europe's books. You can almost hear the whisper of quills across universities, translating, copying, doubting, daring. You walk outside his window and look up at the frozen night sky, brilliant, unbothered, eternal. The same stars that guided Babylonian priests, Greek philosophers, Arab scholars, and medieval monks now revolve. No, don't revolve around the sun. The heavens haven't changed. Only our eyes have. A generation later, another set of eyes will pick up that quiet rebellion and turn it into thunder. You travel west to Padua. The city hums with conversation, taverns brimming with debate, presses clattering, smoke curling from chimneys. The Renaissance is in full bloom, music, anatomy, art, mathematics, all stitched together by an unquenchable hunger for reality. In a small workshop above a Venetian glassmaker's shop, a professor of mathematics is tinkering with a long brass tube fitted with two lenses. He lifts it to the night sky, and the universe tilts. Galileo Galilei gasps. Jupiter swims into view, and there, 4 tiny points of light moving with it, not fixed among the stars. He counts them again, hand trembling. Moons, he whispers. 4 moons. The world, once simple, now blossoms into chaos. He looks at the moon next, rugged, scarred, not smooth and perfect as the church taught. Then to the Milky Way, no mist of heaven but millions upon millions of stars. And finally Venus, changing shape like the moon, proof that it circles the sun. The cosmos has spoken. Galileo writes feverishly through the night, ink splattering across parchment. His words are both revelation and heresy, and yet it moves. You can almost feel the weight of silence that follows. The church, long the guardian of the heavens, now feels the ground slipping beneath it. The Inquisition will come, but Galileo, in his cell years later, will still look upward and smile through the bars. They cannot stop it, he murmurs. The world turns. While he watches the skis, others watch the clockwork within. In Denmark, Tycho Brahe builds an island observatory, Uraniborg, a palace of brass instruments and star charts. Every night he measures, meticulous, relentless, without a telescope, only naked eye and will. His notes, precise beyond belief, will later pass to his student, a quiet, melancholy mathematician named Johannes Kepler. You find Kepler in a dim Prague study, surrounded by candlelight, stacks of parchment, and a skull, his own memento mori. He mutters numbers under his breath, shifting models, erasing, recalculating. Circles fail him, so he dares to try ellipses. And when the figures finally fit, the planets dance not in perfect circles but in stretched ovals, Kepler weeps. God's geometry, he writes, is not what men imagine. He dreams of harmony, of music in motion, the harmonics mundi, the song of the spheres. Each planet a note, each orbit a rhythm. You listen with him, and for a fleeting moment you can almost hear it, the deep, slow symphony of creation itself. From Kepler's orbits to Galileo's telescope, the heavens are no longer divine mystery. They are a puzzle to be solved, a language to be read. In England, a child is born just as Galileo dies. The universe is shifting hands again. You follow the sound of pages turning, the tick of pendulums, the hum of equations. Cambridge, 1665. The plague has emptied the colleges. Silence reigns. A young student retreats to his family farm in Woolsthorpe, where apple trees bloom and fall. One afternoon, an apple drops and the boy looks upward, not in superstition but in wonder. Isaac Newton. Under candlelight he scribbles by hand, laws of motion, of falling, of light. The quill scratches like thunder. He imagines the moon falling endlessly toward Earth, just as the apple does, but missing, forever missing. Gravity is born not as a force of divine will, but as a universal truth. Years later, when he publishes Principia Mathematica, the world will realize that heaven and earth obey the same rules. The apple and the planets are bound by one invisible thread. The cosmos is one vast machine, wound tight by God's hand but running on perfect laws. You close your eyes for a moment, dizzy with it. The journey from Babylon's omens to Newton's equations, thousands of years of fear, awe, and curiosity, all converging here in ink and intellect. Humanity has not dethroned God. It has simply learned to read his handwriting. Outside, dawn rises over the fields. Newton steps into the pale light, his wig slightly crooked, his face drawn but serene. He looks not at the sky but through it. "If I have seen further," he murmurs, "it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." You look up too, past the apple trees, past the circling crows, past the fatting stars. The universe no longer feels unreachable. It feels, for the first time, understandable. The silence that once terrified ancient priests is now filled with music, motion, and math. The cosmos hums with reason, but somewhere deep within it still glows that old fire of wonder. The sun climbs higher, a new age begins. You travel now along dusty roads that stretch toward salt-winded harbors. The age of faith and wonder has found a new purpose: movement. You are no longer in the cloisters or observatories. You're standing on the deck of a creaking ship, sails groaning, ropes taut like harp strings, the smell of brine and tar filling your lungs. The sky above is a dome of steel and fire, a compass for the brave. You grip the railing as the captain calls orders, Portuguese, maybe Spanish, maybe English. The tongue shifts with the wind. These are the centuries when men measured their courage by the stars. Navigation is no longer only for priests and scholars. It is for sailors, pilgrims, merchants, dreamers, all of them guided by constellations older than any kingdom. You tilt your head back. There it is, Polaris, the North Star, steadfast and shining, a single light in the dark chaos of night. To you it looks small, almost delicate, but for sailors it is life itself. Its height above the horizon tells them their latitude. As the waves rise and fall, they trust that single pin of light more than any king's command. You might think compasses have replaced it, but no, in these early centuries, iron needles wobble unreliably, sometimes more haunted than helpful. The stars remain the truest friends. You watch the helmsman, his fingers tracing lines in the air, whispering names of constellations like old prayers: Cassiopeia, Ursa Major, Orion. The sailors laugh, curse, sing, and spit over the railing. Someone carves a cross into the mast for luck. Another swears he saw a sea serpent slithering beneath the waves. You try not to look too closely. At dawn, a sailor points west. "Land," he mutters, but there's nothing, only fog and dreams. You can almost feel how fragile hope becomes when all you have are stars and faith. Navigation is an art of memory, and so the stars become stories. Polaris is the still heart of the sky. Orion hunts forever. The Pleiades flee across the heavens. Even the dullest deckhand can name them by season. They tell time by starlight. Mainstream historians agree. The medieval and early modern mariners used something called a cross staff, a simple wooden rod with a sliding piece that measured the angle between Polaris and the horizon. It was awkward, hard to use on a rolling ship. You basically risked poking out an eye every night, but it worked. And here's the quirky part. Sailors often believed that stars could favor or curse a voyage. They carried little talismans shaped like constellations, or copied horoscopes for their captains, just in case fate listened. Historians still argue whether these sea charms were superstition or a secret way of preserving navigational notes when literacy was rare. The wind shifts. You find yourself on another ship, this one sleeker, faster, slicing through the Mediterranean. A man stands at the bow, silver astrolabe in hand. The instrument gleams, engraved with circles, angles, and Arabic script. This is the mariner's version of the scholar's toy. By day, it measures the sun's height. By night, it captures the stars. His name could be Ibn Majid, one of the greatest navigators of the 15th century. He maps the Indian Ocean with an accuracy that European explorers will later envy. His sailors know how to follow not only Polaris but Canopus, the bright southern star invisible to northern eyes. They use the rhythm of waves, the color of water, the flight of seabirds. You can almost taste their expertise in the air, salty, disciplined, ancient. The ship crosses monsoon winds toward Zanzibar, then swings toward the Arabian Peninsula. Beneath that vast, jeweled sky, the line between science and mysticism blurs. Every calculation is half mathematics, half poem. You close your eyes and imagine traveling further west into the cold Atlantic, where another voyager waits. The year is 1492, and a Genoese sailor named Christopher Columbus kneels on deck with his charts and his faith. The sky above him is endless, but the North Star sinks lower with every mile. His men whisper that perhaps it has fallen. When the new world appears, he doesn't thank maps or mathematics. He thanks heaven. To him, the voyage is divine. To you, it's a celestial coincidence written in the constellations. Weeks later, in another world entirely, you stand beside a Japanese mariner tracing stars on parchment with a bamboo brush. He sketches the Great Bear, the same constellation seen by Vikings and Arab traders. Across oceans, across centuries, Polaris has united them all, a single glowing bridge between cultures that never met. You glance northward where icebergs gleam like glass. A Norse longship rides the waves. The helmsman watches the night sky through a piece of smoky crystal, the famous sunstone said to reveal the sun's direction even through clouds. Historians still debate whether such stones truly worked or were just myth. But you can imagine it. The rock held up to gray daylight, the faint shimmer guiding a voyage across the freezing sea. You feel the rough plank of the ship beneath your feet, the sea's pulse steady as a heartbeat. The Vikings call the North Star Leiðarstjarna, the leading star. When it sinks low, they know they've drifted too far south. They sing to it softly, voices blending with the wind. Star above water, lead us home. Even now, you can hear echoes of that song in the night, because we still look up for direction, not only sailors, but everyone who's ever been lost. The medieval pilgrim had no compass, no telescope, but he had faith. You picture one trudging through moonlit fields, clutching his staff, following the Stella Maris, the star of the sea, another name for the Virgin Mary, but also for Polaris. In the blend of religion and astronomy, even salvation had coordinates. Later, cartographers will start mapping not just stars, but how those stars guide men across the earth. Celestial globes glitter with brass and enamel, constellations carved into them like promises. The sky has become a navigational book, a literal one. And yet, the wonder remains. Every voyage is still an act of faith, every chart a fragile human attempt to pin infinity onto parchment. The ocean stretches beyond sight. The stars ripple in its surface, mirrored and multiplied. You lean over the railing one last time. Somewhere out there, unseen islands wait. The universe above and below whispers, keep moving. The sea wind cools and thins, and soon your breath crystallizes in the air. You followed the compass star north, far beyond the lands of vineyards and cathedrals, where the aurora flickers like ghostly curtains over the horizon. Here, the constellations seem closer, heavier, and the myths that bind them burn colder. You're in the world of the Norse, where the night is long enough to make the stars feel eternal. The sky is not just decoration here, it's a map, a story, and a weapon against the darkness. The wind moans through pine forests, and you hear the crunch of snow beneath your boots. Ahead lies a village ringed with wooden palisades. Smoke curls from longhouses. The scent of seal fat and pine tar fills the air. Inside, men and women sit around a fire, telling stories that mix astronomy and myth in equal measure. You slip inside, thawing your hands by the flames. A skald, An old storyteller with a beard like frozen rope raises a horn of mead and gestures toward the rafters. His eyes gleam in the flicker of firelight. "See the stars," he says, "and you see the bones of gods." The rafters above are carved with runes and tiny constellations. He points to one. There's Orion, though we call him Orwendil's toe, a frostbitten remnant thrown into the heavens by Thor himself. The listeners laugh, shaking snow from their cloaks. Another cluster of stars glows outside the window, the handle of the Big Dipper, though the Norse call it Karlavagnin, the man's wagon. For them, it was not a bear at all but a celestial cart that rolled endlessly across the sky. You step outside, letting the cold bite your face. The aurora bursts into life, green and violet rivers streaming overhead, shifting as if alive. The villagers murmur reverently. To them, this light is the reflection of Valkyrie's armor or the souls of fallen warriors riding toward Valhalla. You can almost hear the horses, the echo of distant horns. Mainstream historians tell us the Norse were extraordinary navigators, guided by sun, stars, and instinct. They used the sunstone, that elusive Iceland spar crystal that polarized light and revealed the sun's position through cloud or fog. Quirky evidence even suggests they had wooden sun compasses, which marked shadows to measure direction. Historians still argue whether such devices truly existed or are later romantic inventions. But then again, the Vikings reached America centuries before Columbus. Someone, somewhere, was reading the heavens correctly. You find yourself aboard a longship now, its dragon prow gleaming with frost. The crew rows in rhythm, their breath misting like smoke. The helmsman squints toward the horizon where the North Star hangs low and steady. His hand rests on a disk of carved wood etched with runes, a Vegvisir, a wayfinder. It's half magic, half mnemonic, the memory of routes carried not on maps but in muscle and mind. At night, the sea and sky merge into one endless darkness, pierced only by that steadfast star. The helmsman murmurs to it softly, as if to a friend. You can feel the ship trusting that tiny light, the same one that guided monks, Arab astronomers, and merchants through their own voyages. "North," he whispers, "always north." As you watch, the aurora dances again, this time so bright it casts shadows across the deck. The crew pause, half in awe, half in fear. One man mutters that it's the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge between worlds, burning brighter than usual tonight. Another spits into the sea for luck. You tilt your head back. The northern sky feels alive in a way no southern one ever could. The stars here don't seem like distant suns. They feel close, intimate, as if they're watching back. Further inland, in stone circles buried beneath snow, ancient carvings mark solstices and lunar cycles. You kneel beside one, brushing frost from the stones. Spirals, notches, and concentric rings appear like fingerprints of the cosmos. The people who built this didn't write their knowledge in books. They etched it in rock for the sky to read. The firelight of their torches would have flickered across those carvings as the constellations turned above, syncing human ritual to the heavens. You imagine a priest or shaman raising arms to the aurora, chanting to gods who might be stars themselves. The Norse didn't divide science and story the way later civilizations did. For them, knowledge was a song, and every star a verse. The Milky Way, that was Bilrurst, the glowing path leading to the realm of the gods. Orion's belt, a fragment of the god Rig's ladder to heaven. The Pleiades, the hens of Phrygia fluttering before winter storms. Even the simplest meteor became a divine sign, a spear hurled, a soul ascending. And then one night you notice something new, a streak of light across the sky. A comet. The villagers gather, murmuring that it's a dragon, a warning, a blade of Odin himself. You stand among them, feeling that old human tremor, wonder mingled with fear. Later, scholars will record such sightings, trying to calculate orbits and periods. But in this frozen world, it's pure mystery, both beautiful and dangerous. You travel further north still, beyond where trees grow, where only ice and stars exist. The world glows silver under the aurora. You lie back on the snow and stare up. The stars seem close enough to touch. Somewhere deep in the cold silence, you sense the pulse of time itself, the same pulse that beat through ziggurats and temples, through Galileo's lens and Kepler's ellipses. The same sky, unchanged, while everything beneath it shifts and fades. You exhale, and your breath becomes a cloud that joins the low mist curling over the ice. For a moment, you imagine the ancestors of the Vikings, huddled by fires, inventing the constellations just to make sense of that vast, glittering loneliness. And maybe that's what humanity has always done, drawn lines between stars to pretend the universe makes sense. A laugh from the longhouse echoes faintly behind you. Someone sings an old Norse lullaby, low, rhythmic, the words soft as snow. It's about the polar star guiding lost souls home. You close your eyes. The wind hums and the aurora shifts once more, green, violet, then a sudden blush of red like embers across the sky. The cosmos above feels alive but peaceful. The fire that once terrified ancient seers now soothes, glows, whispers. The Vikings' night will end. The stars will fade into gray dawn, and the helmsman will lift his sunstone again, searching for the invisible light. You take one last breath of the frozen air and step forward. The world begins to warm, the stars to blur. You're being drawn south again, toward a new kind of light. The frost begins to melt from your boots as the northern wind fades, replaced by the faint scent of parchment, oil paint, and ground glass. You've stepped into the Renaissance, an age where light itself is reborn, bent through new lenses, poured into books, and caught in domes of copper and stone. The stars that once felt divine are now being sketched, measured, questioned, and most dangerously understood. You find yourself in Florence first, in a workshop where sunlight spills through stained glass and illuminates sketches pinned to the wall. Among them are not just saints and angels, but planets, moons, spheres. Artists are now scientists, scientists poets. Leonardo da Vinci leans over a sheet of vellum, his fingers smudged with graphite. You watch him draw the moon, not as a perfect orb of heaven, but as a rocky world, cratered, flawed, alive. He murmurs, La luna non è grave perfetta. The moon is not perfect. It's a world like ours. He doesn't have a telescope, but his imagination already sees what Galileo's glass will soon reveal. He sketches shadows and phases, light and geometry, whispering to himself about the way vision and truth intertwine. You can almost hear him grin. Everything connects. Historians agree that Leonardo anticipated telescopic observation decades before it existed, noting that the moon reflected sunlight, not divine radiance. The quirky bit. In his notebooks, he also theorized that stars were suns, burning far away. He wrote it like an afterthought, as if casually predicting the universe. You leave Florence's warm glow for colder air and sharper minds. The road leads to Nuremberg, where brass, ink, and intellect fuse into something new. You step into a print shop, loud, busy, alive with gears and ink rollers. Here, books are multiplying like stars in a dark sky. On a table lies a freshly printed masterpiece, a star atlas, Uranometria 1603. Johannes Bayer's work. You run your fingers across its pages. The constellations are drawn as elegant figures, winged Perseus, crouching Leo, Andromeda in chains, but behind the art lies mathematics. For the first time, every visible star has coordinates. The cosmos has an address system. You tilt your head, and suddenly, all of history seems to converge here. The Babylonian ziggurat, the Egyptian obelisk, the Islamic astrolabe, all leading to this printed page where myth and measurement finally shake hands. But the Renaissance isn't satisfied with books, it wants to see. You find Galileo again, older now, standing beside his telescope on a Venetian balcony. He's aiming at Jupiter, his fingers trembling with excitement. He has built what others called a toy into a window to infinity. When he tilts it upward, the city's bells fade. The universe unfolds like a living manuscript. You lean in beside him, eyes pressed to the cold brass rim. There, tiny spheres circling a giant. Jupiter and its moons, clear and undeniable. You can almost hear the gasp that will echo through history. He writes letters all night to his friends in Florence. I have discovered 4 new stars, as if the heavens themselves had decided to grant him an audience. And yet the more he sees, the lonelier he feels. The old comfort, that Earth sits at the center, slips away. You glance at Galileo's face, the light of his candle trembling across it. His faith and his reason wrestle quietly in the dark. Perhaps, he says softly, God's greatness lies not in making us central, but in making us capable of understanding. In another corner of Europe, a quiet figure is charting a different kind of revolution. In Poland, Kepler's laws are now being copied, and in England, thinkers are starting to look up without fear of blasphemy. Historians still argue whether the Renaissance truly believed in science or just dressed it in divine clothes. But one thing's certain: for the first time, humanity dares to stare directly at creation and to measure it. You walk into a small observatory in Prague. The air smells of ink and melted wax. Astronomers stand at tall sextants, murmuring calculations. They speak not of omens, but of orbits, not of fate, but of force. There's humor here too, scientific egos already blooming. One scholar brags that he can name every visible star. Another rolls his eyes and says, "Then name the ones that are." You smile. Progress, it seems, has always come with sarcasm. As you step outside, night has fallen again. The city hums with printing presses and candlelight. The moon glows above the spires, and you realize that these thinkers have done something miraculous. They've pulled heaven down, not to defile it, but to understand it. The Renaissance gaze is both reverent and rebellious. They build domes to mirror the sky, Brunelleschi's in Florence, Michelangelo's in Rome, each one a man-made cosmos. Cathedrals become observatories of faith and geometry, proving that beauty and truth are not enemies after all. Somewhere Copernicus's dusty manuscript finally finds its readers. Quiet men in velvet caps debate over wine whether the earth truly moves. One laughs. "If it spins, why don't we fall off?" Another smirks. "Maybe you already have." You can almost feel the tremor running through Europe, small at first, like the faint hum of a distant clockwork. But soon, the sound grows. Every discovery clicks into place, a celestial machine slowly coming to life. Still, not everyone is ready. Outside the observatories, preachers thunder that pride has blinded mankind. Pamphlets call telescopes instruments of deceit. Galileo's trial looms like a shadow over every new idea. You stand in the courtroom beside him, feeling the heat of candlelight and fear. He bows before the Inquisition, forced to renounce what his eyes have seen. The judge glares, the crowd murmurs, and Galileo mutters his defiance under his breath. "E per si muove," and yet it moves. It's whispered, never shouted, but it becomes the heartbeat of a new world. Later, when Galileo's bones rest and his telescope gathers dust, you wander the streets of Padua. The same sky gleams above, unchanged. But the people beneath it are different now. They no longer worship the stars, they study them. You tilt your head back once more. The constellations look softer somehow, humbler, as if they're adjusting to this new human gaze. The Renaissance has stolen their mystery and replaced it with wonder of a new kind: knowledge. Still, you feel the old pulse of awe, because even through the lens, even through the math, the stars are not conquered, they're only closer. A student passes by, cradling a telescope in one arm and a Bible in the other. He glances up and smiles, whispering, "Maybe both are true." And for the first time in centuries, it feels like they might be. The echo of Galileo's whispered defiance, "E per si muove," still lingers as you cross into the next age. The world hums with invention, brass gears, and the smell of burning coal. The Renaissance's golden light gives way to iron and smoke. The age of reason, the age when humankind decides that if the universe will not reveal its secrets freely, it shall be compelled to. You find yourself in London, 1666. The air is thick with soot and ambition. From a window overlooking the quiet gardens of Trinity College, a young scholar sits beside an apple tree, squinting at falling fruit. His name, of course, is Isaac Newton. He is neither saint nor sorcerer, just a man obsessed with the invisible. Around him lie scattered lenses, prisms, and notebooks. The pages are crammed with strange diagrams, triangles of force, arcs of orbit, circles labeled with planets and gods. He's trying to cage the universe in numbers. As you watch, he mutters to himself, "The same law that brings the apple down may bind the moon above." He writes furiously, scratching equations that make the very stars obedient. Historians tell us he worked in near isolation, driven by plague, paranoia, and genius. He rarely ate, rarely slept. He tested optics by stabbing needles behind his eyelid to study light. And when he finally presented his Principia Mathematica, it was as if he had rewritten Genesis, not in Hebrew, but in calculus. But there's a quiet irony here. Newton's world is both rational and mystical. His laboratory smells of mercury and candle smoke, his shelves lined with alchemical treatises. He measures the heavens by mathematics, and then spends nights searching for the philosopher's stone. You realize the Enlightenment didn't kill magic, it simply translated it into formulas. You walk next through the corridors of the Royal Society, where polished brass telescopes and ink-stained journals line the tables. A man with a wig powdered white like frost leans over a diagram of Saturn's rings. Another carefully adjusts a pendulum clock. Order, they say, is the new faith. And yet laughter ripples through the hall. Experiments fail spectacularly. Lenses shatter, mercury spills, frogs refuse to conduct electricity. Someone quips, even reason needs a sense of humor. In the corner sits Edmund Halley charting comets. He's predicting the return of one, his own, 75 years into the future. He knows he'll be dead by then, but he smiles anyway. Posterity, he says, will confirm me. And it does. You drift through Paris next, where salons glitter with candles and intellect. Philosophers argue beneath chandeliers, Voltaire, Diderot, and Rousseau. They raise their glasses to science, liberty, and the human mind. But beyond the velvet curtains, the streets seethe with hunger. The same rational world that measures the heavens still fails to feed the earth. Somewhere in a dark workshop, a clockmaker is fashioning the ultimate metaphor for this age, a mechanical planetarium where brass spheres rotate on delicate arms. Kings buy them to prove that even the cosmos can be conquered by craftsmanship. But the more perfect these machines become, the smaller man feels inside them. You find yourself staring into one such orrery. It's hypnotic. Jupiter gleams like a bead of gold, Earth spins silently on its pin, and a tiny moon traces its orbit like a ghost. Everything moves with flawless predictability. Yet when you look up at the real night sky through the window, the stars still burn with wildness that no clock can capture. Across Europe, observatories rise like temples of reason, Greenwich, Paris, Berlin. Instruments stretch toward the heavens. Quadrants, armillary spheres, barometers, lenses longer than ships' masts. You visit one on a wind-bitten hilltop. A young woman, pale in the lamplight, is copying data into a ledger. Her name is Caroline Herschel. Her brother, William, peers through a massive telescope of their own making. When he gasps, she looks up. "I think I've found a new world," he whispers. You climb the ladder beside him and see it, Uranus, icy, distant, slow. Humanity's family of planets has grown. The universe is no longer sevenfold and sacred. It's expanding, infinite, cold. Later, Caroline herself discovers a comet, something no woman before her has done. When the Royal Society prints her name, it's small, almost apologetic, but it's there. For the first time, a woman's eyes have altered the map of the heavens. You sense the age of reason straining against its own boundaries. The machines have grown larger, but so have the mysteries. Light itself is misbehaving, bending, scattering, dividing into colors. Newton's order trembles. Then comes a strange, quiet figure from Saxony, William Herschel again, now older. He turns his telescope not just toward planets, but into the dark between stars. He begins to count them slowly, obsessively, for years. What he finds shocks him. The stars form a disk, a milky band, our galaxy. He calls it the Milky Way, but he knows it's more than dust. A universe of suns, he murmurs. That night you sit with him and Caroline by their telescope. The frost bites, the candle sputters, and he stares upward, eyes bright with wonder. We are inside the system, he says, and yet we can map it. It is the perfect summary of the Enlightenment spirit, man measuring himself from within the infinite. But there is unease, too. The mechanical heavens no longer feel divine, they feel empty. Philosophers whisper that perhaps the universe doesn't need God at all. Others fear that, if reason rules all, where does meaning go? So artists step in again. Painters like Turner and poets like Wordsworth turn their eyes back to nature, not to measure it, but to feel it. We murder to dissect, Wordsworth laments, warning that reason, unchecked, kills wonder. In a London gallery, you stand before Turner's Rain, Steam, and Speed. A train hurtles through mist, iron devouring air and light. It's the Enlightenment at full speed, unstoppable and terrifying. You realize you're standing on the edge of something vast. The Enlightenment has mapped the world, but in doing so, it has made humanity hungry again, for emotion, for mystery, for the sublime. Soon the romantics will rise, chasing not equations but echoes, not gravity but grace. But for now, you linger on this threshold, between light and shadow, order and awe, listening to the ticking of a clock that beats in perfect rhythm with the stars. And in that rhythm you hear it, the pulse of a universe that, despite every equation, still dares to remain beautifully, profoundly alive. The night grows quieter now, softer. You're standing amid ruins that seem to hum with memory, stones half swallowed by moss, temples long emptied of their worshippers, and silent corridors that once echoed with chants timed to the turning of the heavens. The Enlightenment's clean instruments have faded behind you. Ahead lies something older, stranger, fragments of worlds rediscovered, misinterpreted, and still whispering their secrets to anyone who looks up. You begin in a jungle. Vines coil over stone like green serpents, and the air smells of earth and thunder. Through the leaves you glimpse carved steps rising toward the stars. Chichen Itza, Mexico, the temple of Kukulkan, built by the Maya to honor the feathered serpent. At each equinox, sunlight strikes the pyramid just right, casting a pattern that looks like a serpent slithering down its side. It's one of those moments when geometry and magic shake hands. Tourists cheer and snap photos now, but you can almost hear the drums of ancient priests, the conch horns, the heartbeat of a civilization that watched the sky not with telescopes, but with devotion. Historians still argue whether the Mayas' astronomical precision was for science or sacrifice, whether they truly cared about predicting eclipses, or if the cosmos was merely the stage for ritual drama. Either way, they built calendars that would make your smartphone jealous. You brush aside a fern and find yourself among another people who also built for the heavens, the builders of Stonehenge. Those monoliths stand cold and silent on the Salisbury Plain, surrounded by sheep that couldn't care less. But you, standing in that wind, can feel the structure hum with alignment. The midsummer sunrise framed perfectly through the heel stone, the midwinter sunset caught like a ritual ember. Scholars bring drones and laser scanners, but no one truly knows why it's there. Was it a calendar, a temple, a concert venue for druids with impeccable timing? Historians still argue. One even suggests it was a prehistoric hospital, because, of course, nothing says urgent care like hauling 25-ton stones across swamps. From England, you drift eastward to the desert, a plain of golden dust and black rock. There, half buried in sand, lie the Nabatean temples of Petra. The facade of Al-Khazne gleams pink under starlight, and you notice how the canyon walls frame the dawn like a celestial corridor. Some alignments suggest the city's temples were built to mark the solstices. Every beam of sunlight, every shadow, a sermon in stone. It's strange how these forgotten places seem to know the sky better than we do, even with all our satellites. The ancients didn't separate astronomy from living. They built their very worlds around it. Now imagine walking through Angkor Wat before dawn. The air is heavy with incense and mist, and the sky blushes violet. As the sun rises on the spring equinox, its first light strikes the central tower, an ancient Cambodian heartbeat, still timed to the heavens. The temple isn't just art or religion. It's an enormous cosmic clock set to eternity. And yet, for centuries, it was lost to the jungle. The roots of strangler figs wrapped around it like time itself reclaiming its prize. When French explorers rediscovered it in the 19th century, they treated it like their find, as if the local monks hadn't been tending it all along. You can't help but smile. History has a habit of calling things forgotten just because Europe forgot them. You travel next to the Andes, where the thin air feels like glass. The ruins of Machu Picchu sprawl beneath you, terraces like giant fingerprints on the mountainside. The Inca called themselves children of the sun, and here, the Temple of the Sun still aligns with the June solstice sunrise. Rays of gold slide perfectly through a stone window onto a carved altar. And yet, some scholars whisper that Machu Picchu's precision was more spiritual than scientific. They watched the heavens not to measure them, one archaeologist muses, but to be seen by them. That line lingers with you, to be seen by the stars. It's a subtle shift, from mastering the cosmos to belonging within it. The ancients weren't spectators of the universe, they were participants in its rhythm. Now you walk among ruins less famous but equally haunting, the megalithic temples of Malta, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids. The Gigantica temples, built 5,000 years ago, align with the solstices too. Their doorways glow like portals when sunlight passes through. You trail your fingers over the limestone and feel its warmth, like touching history's pulse. A quirky tidbit for you. Some archaeologists found small stone spheres around the site and still argue about their purpose. Wheels, ritual tools, primitive bowling balls. You kind of hope for the last one. Imagine a Neolithic league called the Solstice Rollers. As you leave Malta, the Mediterranean opens before you like a mirror. You think of the lost library of Alexandria, where scholars once cataloged the heavens in papyrus scrolls that later turned to ash. The building's gone, but its dream still flickers every time we name a new star or upload a sky map. And then, one of the strangest rediscoveries of all, the ruins of Nabta Playa, deep in the Egyptian desert. Hardly anyone had heard of it until the late 20th century. Circles of stone mark the cardinal directions, with alignments to Orion and Sirius. Archaeologists date it to around 5000 BC, possibly the world's first astronomical site, built by herders before Egypt was even Egypt. Historians still argue whether it was a temple, an observatory, or a meeting place for nomads who simply liked stargazing. But there it sits, silent and stubborn, a stone calendar older than writing. You realize now how many of these wonders nearly vanished. Jungle, sand, ice, and time all conspired to erase them. And yet, humans keep finding them again, like our species has an instinct to remember. As the modern world spreads its electric glow, we lose sight of the stars, but we build planetariums to bring them back. We draw constellations on domes instead of ceilings of sky. You can almost hear the ancestors chuckling. You built temples of light inside boxes now. A soft wind stirs. You stand at the edge of a modern city, its skyline shimmering with neon, and in that glow, the ruins of an old temple rest quietly at your feet. Maybe this is what eternity looks like, not immortal stone, but the act of remembering. Every rediscovered site, every debated alignment, Every spark of curiosity is a reminder that even when humanity forgets, the stars do not. They keep their positions faithfully, waiting for us to look up again. And as you tilt your head toward the sky, the Milky Way stretches like spilled salt across the velvet dark. For a fleeting moment, the modern and the ancient touch, the glow of your phone screen, the shimmer of forgotten constellations, both tiny lights burning against infinity. You take a slow breath. Somewhere between Chichen Itza and the city's hum, you understand what all those builders and dreamers were trying to say. That meaning is not found in the stones themselves, but in the act of aligning your heart with the sky. And maybe, just maybe, when we finally stop trying to own the cosmos, we can listen again to the forgotten hum of temples that still sing in starlight. The air feels thinner now, like the final breath before dawn. You've walked through centuries, ziggurats, pyramids, observatories, telescopes, and here you are, back under the same sky that started it all. Only now it glows not just with starlight but with memory. You stand on a dark hilltop far from any city. No hum of traffic, no neon glare. Just wind, the faint scent of pine, and the soft crackle of your breath in the cold. Above you, the universe is unfiltered, thousands of stars like pinpricks in black velvet. The Milky Way stretches overhead in a slow, milky swirl. It's so bright that you can see your shadow on the ground. Once people built temples to this. Now you build telescopes, space stations, and algorithms. The temples have changed shape, but not the desire. You're still chasing that same question the Sumerians asked with their reed sticks. Why does it all move so beautifully? To your left, a low hum rises. The great eye of a modern observatory turns, its silver dome opening like a mechanical flower. Inside, mirrors the size of swimming pools catch ancient light, photons that left their stars before the pyramids were even dreams. You step inside, the metal floor cold beneath your boots. Scientists in fleece jackets murmur to their monitors, sipping stale coffee. There's no incense, no altar, just data streaming in numbers and graphs. And yet, the reverence is the same. A screen glows blue. On it, a new image slowly forms, a nebula, all tendrils and fire. The colors are false, yes, but the awe is. Someone whispers, "Look at that." Another adds, "We're seeing the birthplace of stars." You smile because the phrase could have come from any age. Ancient or modern, humanity always names the unknown with poetry first. Historians still argue whether modern science killed wonder or made it immortal. But as you watch light older than history arrive on a pixelated screen, the answer feels obvious. Wonder isn't dead, it's just wearing a lab coat now. You walk outside again, your eyes adjusting to the dark. The telescope continues its slow rotation, humming like a giant prayer wheel. In the distance, satellites blink faintly across the sky, our new constellations, tracing invisible maps of connection. You think of Galileo, banned from the church for looking too closely. You think of the Mayan astronomers who built their temples so the serpent of sunlight would crawl perfectly at equinox. You think of the monks calculating Easter by moonlight and the Vikings steering by Polaris. Every one of them had the same feeling you have now. Smallness, wonder, the sacred ache of looking up. Maybe that's what links you to them. Not your tools, not your knowledge, but your awe. A rustle behind you breaks the silence. A child bundled in a too-big jacket points upward. "Is that Orion?" they ask. You nod. "See his belt, 3 stars in a row." The child squints. "What's that fuzzy bit near it?" You grin. "That's the Orion Nebula, the place where stars are born." For a moment, time folds. You're standing in Babylon, teaching a young apprentice the same thing. Or maybe you're in Egypt, pointing at Sirius as it heralds the flood. Or perhaps you're in some future city, where children look up through a glass dome at the same question, still unanswered. Because that's the secret, isn't it? The stars never stopped speaking. We just stopped listening loudly enough. The world turns slowly beneath your feet. The constellations drift west and the horizon begins to glow. The first hint of dawn seeps upward, pale as parchment. You think about everything you've seen, the ziggurats, the cathedrals, the observatories, the ruins that once hummed with prayer. All of it, the architecture, the myth, the math, was really the same gesture. Humanity stretching its fingers toward eternity. You sit down on a cool rock. The wind brushes your hair. Somewhere below, the modern world stirs, cars, phones, headlines. But up here, time moves at the speed of starlight. You whisper something, though you're not sure to whom. Maybe to the cosmos, maybe to yourself. We were never trying to conquer you. We were just trying to remember you. And maybe the stars whisper back, so softly that you can't tell if it's sound or imagination. We remember you too. The sky lightens. The stars fade one by one, reluctant to leave. The last to vanish is Venus, bright as a tear in daylight. You feel that familiar ache again, the kind that's equal parts wonder and farewell. Then the sun rises, slow and deliberate, golden light flooding the land like a benediction. It touches every ruined temple, every satellite, every child looking up through a telescope somewhere. The universe keeps turning. You smile because so do you. And for a final, fleeting heartbeat, you imagine all those who once looked up, priests, poets, astronomers, dreamers, standing beside you, their shadows mingling with yours. They don't need temples anymore. The sky was always the temple. So now, as you breathe slower and your eyes grow heavy, let the night settle over you again. Forget the centuries, the instruments, the arguments. Just listen. The same quiet hum that filled ancient temples still fills the air, a low vibration beneath the sound of your own heartbeat. Maybe you picture those ruins now, moss-covered and half-lit by moonlight. Maybe you see a telescope turning toward a distant star. Or maybe you just see the ceiling above you, dim and ordinary. But it's all the same story. Every ceiling is just a fragment of the dome above the world. Take a deep breath. Feel how the air has traveled through time, through pyramids and abbeys, through observatories and deserts, before it reached your lungs tonight. You're part of that same rhythm, that same turning. And as you drift, the stars keep shining, steady, patient, older than your worries, brighter than your doubts. They don't demand understanding, they only invite you to notice. You can almost hear the murmur of those who came before, whispering across millennia, keep looking up. The story isn't finished. So let the thought of those distant lights cradle you. The universe is vast, yes, but it's also intimate enough to fit behind your eyelids. Sleep now beneath the same constellations that guided kings, sailors, monks, and dreamers. The heavens are still watching, just as they always have. Sweet dreams.